Good morning. We're here today with Robin Finney from Wandering Ant, and we're going to talk a little bit about how Robin's journey has begun. Robin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So let's get right into things. Let's talk a little bit about who you are. Introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your background. What was your education or your training? What did you do to start with?
Yeah, so I was in corporate America for 11 years, and I went to school. I grew up in Tennessee and went to a small liberal arts college and got a degree in public relations and marketing. And I took the first job out of college. I was living with a roommate, and she was getting married, and she worked in the leasing office at our apartment community. And she said, "Hey, I'm leaving. Do you want my spot?" And I thought, well, I don't have anything else right now, so I'll take this job until I find what I'm really looking for. And of course, I had no clue what I was looking for. So I started leasing apartments. And when I started, I thought, okay, I'll do this for 6 months until I find a real job. Because for some reason, I thought leasing apartments wasn't a real job. But once I got into it, I realized, no, this is actually, it's a real job. There's a lot of responsibility. And so I was leasing apartments for a couple years, and but since my degree was in marketing and PR, that's the direction I wanted to go. And so finally our department grew in our company, and so they took me on. So about 3.5 years in, I stepped into a marketing role. And soon after that, they relocated me to Dallas, Texas. And when I started my job, I always had a work to travel mentality. So I studied abroad in college, and that was my first time traveling internationally. And it just opened up a whole world for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, I felt like that was the missing piece in my life. And I loved exploring and meeting people and just the adventure side of it and experiencing different cultures. And so I, every year, would plan a trip, like one big trip, and go on with a couple of my girlfriends from college. And we went all over. We went to Africa, New Zealand, Australia, Iceland, all over Europe. And I would go on these trips and meet people who were like actually just traveling and had their own businesses, or they were like nomads or expats or doing whatever. And I was like, wow, how do you get to do that? And I would see other people doing it, and I just never thought it was a possibility for me. And so I would go on a trip, be all excited, and then I would come back to work, and I would literally go through depression. And I had to look it up one year that post-vacation depression is an actual thing. Like, I had no idea, because I was like, why am I feeling like this? And so then when I was able to kind of see that it was an actual thing, then I was able to start caring for myself more and just really feeling the impact of not following your heart. Because it's like I would go and see this other life, and then I'd come back and be at a desk. And the ironic thing with my job is I worked from home, and they wanted me in Dallas. And so for me, that was difficult, because I could see a whole world out there and see all these people who were living life abroad and keeping their jobs. And so it just didn't make sense to me why do I need to be here when I can do my job anywhere? And so I finally, at the 10-year mark, I turned in my notice, and I turned in about a 60-day notice and stayed about 90 days after that. And it was right before I hit 11 years with my company that I took the plunge and bought a one-way ticket to Australia and left the country. So.
Oh, wow. Well, that's quite a story. And one of the things I find so interesting about entrepreneurs is their backstory. what they've did in the past, where they've came from, and how they've ended up where they are now. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So I want to know a little bit more about Wandering Ant. Now, I know this is a new venture for you, and I want to know, what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah. So I, 2 years ago, I started a blog, and I've always loved writing, and writing's very therapeutic for me. And so I kept thinking about starting a blog, and then I thought, well, I'm just going to take the plunge. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to call it. And I knew I wanted to incorporate travel somehow. And I'm an aunt to, at the time it was 4 nieces, and now it's 4 nieces and a nephew. And they're my whole world. Like I love them so much, and I love being an aunt, and I love wandering. And so I was like, that's kind of a fun name. So that's how I came up. And I always tell people when I meet them, and they're like, Wandering Ant. And I'm like, yes, AUNT, because a lot of people think it's like the insect. So it started with, I just launched a blog, and I just started writing about, I call myself a thoughtful thinker. So I just started writing from that, and writing just deeper conversations and what was going on internally, and how travel impacted me. And I was going through yoga teacher training before I quit my career, and was kind of writing about the impact of that. And then it just, it started to expand from there. And it was when I was traveling. Last year after I quit my job, I solo traveled the world for 7 months. And it was on that journey that I started getting more of a vision of my brand and what I wanted to make of that.
Okay, so my big question is, how do you sustain yourself financially while you're traveling?
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely one of my top questions that I get. So last year I left on, I actually only had a little bit of savings, and then I had like my final pay and a bonus on top of that. So I left with that because I was at the point where I knew nothing was going to change in my life. It didn't matter. Like, I could keep earning money, and I wasn't going to save it.
You needed a change, and money was no longer an object. It was either change or basically be under the bus. That's not
right.
the right way to say it, but yes, but
yeah,
basically
absolutely.
you needed it.
Yeah. And so I knew I had to do something to just kind of alter my reality. And so I left with that, and I traveled for about 7 weeks in Australia and Thailand. And then I came back to the States for World Domination Summit and in Portland. And then I was clear that I wanted to sell my car, because I knew I wanted to continue this lifestyle and explore and see where it would lead. So I came back to Dallas and sold my car. And at that point, I'd already let go of like my apartment and my furniture and a lot of my possessions, but I still had my car. And so I sold that. And so I traveled off of that for several months. It carried me through almost to the end of the year. And then I also cashed in my 401k. And it was funny because it was like, I don't share this a lot because for me, it's like, I'm like, oh, people are judging me or think like, what are you doing throwing your retirement out? But I look at it like it's an investment in me. And I wanted to continue to explore where the world of being a nomad and solo travel would lead. So that's what I've been living off of. And then also just taking on some contract jobs, doing a little bit of contract work for my previous company, and writing jobs, and then also now just launched a business. So
wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it can get very personal to be sharing the financial stuff, but it's also really important for listeners to hear how people are making these things happen, because I know there's other people out there just like you who want to leave the corporate world behind and really free themselves to learn more about the world and start their own business and everything else. So thank you.
Yeah.
So now I know you've just launched, and I'm betting you've had a lot of questions during launch. So what are some of
Yes.
the questions? What are some of the things that have come up that you've needed to have answered that have been difficult as you've created your business?
Yeah. So I'm definitely, it's interesting because when I started on this journey, I kind of was just thinking that I was totally on my own. And so I was kind of just like running. I was running fast and traveling fast, um and it was in November when I started getting a vision for where I could take what I could create. And so I started envisioning just like offering my services to other people to support them, and services in the realm of travel and designing experiences for people that meet their desires and not mine. And so when I got that, I was like, okay, this is great. I feel really good about this. And when I launched, I still had that feeling that I was on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like, just from talking to other entrepreneurs, it's kind of, they've run into that in the beginning too, where you think like you may have come from a team environment before or had a boss or somebody who was just in making sure that you were kind of staying on track and getting your projects done, and what you like, your everything, message, marketing. And it was really just like a few days ago that I've already launched, and I have a couple clients, but I just felt like something was missing in my message, and I realized that I'm missing my community and support.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back and was reading my content. I was like, wow, I'm making this all about me. Like, I'm not like coming across necessarily and saying that it's like, you need to travel because I traveled, or you need to experience these places because I did. But I kind of got that that's the tone that I was writing with. And so I have a shift. I've had a shift now, and that's what I'm working on this week. Just to be raw, it's like it's constantly changing in the beginning, and I think that's the great thing is when you launch, and it was the same thing with when I launched my blog. I didn't have a clear intention on my blog, but I knew I needed to just get started, and then my message would develop more and what I wanted to write about. And I'm finding the same thing with launching my business. Is okay, I launched, I put myself out there, and now I'm going to refine and even like niche down and see like who my target client really is and how I can support that person. And so that's the phase I'm in right now.
Well, and I know we're both very fortunate too, because we're both WDS, or World Domination Summit alumni, and we do through that have a great network of digital nomads and global entrepreneurs. So I'm hoping you're able to tap into some of that community, that part of our community.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually when I was at World Domination Summit last year, there was a meetup for digital nomads. And I went to that, and I met the founders of 7 and 7, which is a conference that takes place. It's in 7 years, and they do it every year on a different continent.
Okay.
And so last year it was in South America. So I went to Colombia and went to that conference. It was incredible. And it was my first experience in South America. And what I liked about that conference is it's 100 people. So it's really intimate. And it opened my eyes to what people are doing. And that kind of inspired me to go down this path as well.
I'm actually writing that down because I love that idea, the 7 and 7 conference.
Yeah, this year
I'm going to have to check
New
it out.
Zealand.
Yeah.
Yes, please come.
Wow.
It's in New Zealand in October.
I have a friend who's moving there. That's another reason to travel to it.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So um, I know that we find things easy and we find things really difficult as we're starting. What was some of the easiest things for you to do when you started?
So I'm like a visionary and
Hmm.
very creative, and I do yoga and meditation, and I've gone on many meditation retreats. And so I'm really good at imagery in that sense and visualizing like the bigger picture. So it was kind of like once when I got it and got the inspiration for my business, then it just started flowing. Like my message and what I was wanting to offer, and so that part I feel comes easier to me, and the actual like creation side of it. So just putting the content on my website and making it look good and finding the right imagery. And I was in marketing for 10 years before that. So that part comes naturally to me.
And is there something that you found absolutely the most difficult? Is there something that's still evading you in knowledge or something that you really, really hate doing as part of your business?
Yeah, I think it's honestly like I'm a connector. I call myself an authentic connector, and I'm great at connecting other people. And I've been forgetting that about me, like connecting people to me. And so it's been interesting just navigating the down the path of like how do you find clients, and how do you not only clients but how do you find the right ones who are meant to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I've kind of been in that realm. And then also it's just interesting because I know marketing, I know sales, I know ads, and I don't I realized when I was traveling, I was like, I don't really enjoy this,
And that's
even though
so
I did it for
important.
10 years.
Yep,
I
it's
know.
important to recognize what you really don't enjoy because so many of us go through life just keep doing the same thing, even if we don't like it. And
Yeah.
we don't take the time or we just never realize how much it's actually killing our inner spirit. And
Right.
yeah, like I was a real estate law clerk for years and I was really good at my job, but I hated it because I felt like a trained monkey could do that. And that's not true. You need a lot of skill to be able to manage the files and everything. But that was sort of how I was feeling. I was good at my job, but I hated it that much that it was
Mm,
bringing me down. So it's great. You can do the marketing, but it's not what you want to be doing. And I know that
right.
you're a connector and I know that you are best working with people, myself included. I'd rather be working with people, having conversations with people than working on my accounting or um, picking up a phone is one of my most difficult tasks. I love to talk on the phone, I love to talk to people, but if I have to pick up that phone and make a call to someone, yeah, that's not going to happen
It's
anytime.
so funny because I'm totally in that realm too.
Yes.
And I did some sales calls for somebody recently,
Hmm.
and because I'm trying on different things. I say at the beginning of the year I was like I'm dating opportunities, and so I
Hmm.
thought I was like, well, I believe in this person and their message, and I'm a connector. And so I was like, I'll be more than happy to make phone calls for you. And I was like, oh my goodness, I do not like this. I do not. And so that's honestly one of the best pieces of
Hmm.
advice I got last year. It was from my orthodontist of all people. Um, I went and saw him right before I went on my journey, and he said, "What is your intention for your trip?" And I said, "Well, it was like I really want to spend some time just like letting go and resetting and healing and just being." And then I said, "I also want to just figure out what it is I want to do." And he said, "Or you'll figure out what you don't want to do."
Yes. Yes.
And that has definitely stuck with me, and I'm realizing that.
Yes. So,
So yeah, so I'm just learning that it's very valuable to recognize what it is that you don't enjoy. And I recently read the book, The Big Leap, and it talks about the concept of you have your zone of experience and you have your zone of genius. And when you're in your zone of experience, it's like you're good at it, you know it, you can do it no problem. But is that really what you were created for, what you're meant for? Is that really what your genius is? And so it was that kind of, when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's really great to look at. And so I really I fully believe in trying things. Obviously, that since I just traveled by myself and I'm doing that still, to get yourself like uncomfortable and try different things. And also just recognize, like, when you are trying something new, and this is even with starting a business, is what do I like about this and what do I not like? And it can be one thing that, like, oh, I just don't enjoy doing this, like accounting or something. And you may still, like, we're always going to have tasks that we don't enjoy.
Exactly.
But I think it's always good to narrow it down to the why. Like, why is it that I don't enjoy doing this part? And what I've found with some things is it's not that I don't enjoy it, it's that I'm avoiding doing it because I'm afraid of my greatness.
Yes, yes. And that's a big problem for us. We often put limiting beliefs on ourselves. I know for myself, in terms of the phone, I'm afraid of interrupting people when I call them. And I don't want to bug them if they're busy, which is absolutely ridiculous and overrated, because chances are they would be interested in talking to me. And if they're not, then they are going to let me know that it's not a good time. Most of them are not going to bite my head off if I give them a call and they can't take the call. I might get their voicemail. And it's a horrible feeling to be on the phone making a call and thinking, please be voicemail, please be voicemail, please be voicemail. Yet I know I love to talk to people. So one thing that it makes me think of is, do you remember in the older shows, you'd have the secretary who calls the whoever their boss wants to talk to on the phone. They call the boss and then they're like, so-and-so's on line 1. In fact, in Devil Wears Prada, they have that same thing where they say Giovanni's on 1 or something like that. And maybe that's what I need. I just need someone to dial a phone for me and hand it to me.
Yeah.
There we go. Rebecca needs a phone dialer. Yes.
Yes.
For someone, perhaps. So now we're talking also about finding what you're good at and finding inspiration. What I want to know is, what is your BHAG, or your big, hairy, audacious goal? If you could put that biggest goal out there for Wandering Ant or for yourself, what would it be? What would it look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So currently as I said earlier, I'm designing, I call myself a travel designer. So I'm designing travel experiences for people that are going to be memorable and just really fit their why and why they're wanting to go on that trip, and just helping them to create that. And I also, when I was with solo traveling, the biggest questions I get are, aren't you afraid to travel by yourself? And don't you get lonely? And it's all very cautious and fear-based when people are asking me. And so I'm designing group experiences for people who want to solo travel and they're not ready to do it on their own yet. So I have a vision of kind of where I see that going, and I'm also still kind of in the creation mode. But for me, I know, just like coaching people in, it's kind of centered around confidence and just really like gearing that up and knowing that it's not necessarily about being somewhere by yourself. It's just like, it's really owning who you are and being confident in your own skin and allowing yourself to be seen, and just connecting to people and through travel and through these experiences. And so that's kind of where I'm headed. And then my biggest like dream that I have, that I've had since I was, I mean, in high school probably, is being on stage and being like a public speaker and speaking at conferences, doing TED Talks, writing, like I see myself writing a book and telling my story. And so that's kind of my like big hairy vision, as you called it, kind of like
big, hairy, audacious goal.
Audacious goal. Yeah.
So how do we get you on stage? What are you doing to work on getting yourself on stage?
Yeah. So I, podcast interviews. I've been connecting with a lot of people in that realm, and I'm currently in Dallas right now, but wherever I am, I always make it a point to go to events so that I can network with people and meet people and share my story. Because that's, for me, I really got, I was on a call last week, and it was a coaching call, and it was a group call, and she was asking somebody like, what makes you shine most? And I was like, that's a great question. And so while somebody else was sharing, and I'm like creating it for myself, and I wrote down connecting, leading, and being in front of people. And that's like where I shine. It's like when I'm with people. And so it's just, I've been just networking and going to events like WDS and 7 and 7 and any like mini like networking events like locally, and then just also, and I'm involved in a lot of online groups. And so it's just, when I see an opportunity, then I'll just go after it. And
wonderful. So now, being that we are both World Domination Summit alumni, and the general theme of World Domination Summit is to live a remarkable life in a conventional world, and the fact that this week is International Women's Day week, what advice would you have for women entrepreneurs to live a remarkable life?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love this week so much, because I love women's empowerment and just really owning who you are. So I definitely, it's exactly that. It's owning who you are and your message, and not tailoring it to anybody else's. That's one thing I've learned as I'm starting. It's like, I have a vision, and I have a vision. I can't explain why I have this vision, but it's there for a reason. And other people have come in and they're like, well, why don't you try this? Or why don't you try that? And which is great. I love brainstorming and gathering ideas, but I know that I have this vision for a reason. So it's inquiring about that and seeing like, well, what is it about that? So I definitely think just owning who you are is part of living that remarkable life. And then also just be you and live life on your terms. And they may be silly. Like, you may think like, oh, but that's not how others live. And when I quit my career, I said I was quitting for freedom and flexibility. And that's different for everybody. But for me, that looks like being anywhere when I want to be. So it's like, I can be in Mexico and go back to Boston to speak at an event, which is something I did last year. And then I can go back to Columbia to go to a conference, and then be somewhere else. And so it's just designing your life how you want it.
So that brings us to the conclusion of our chat today, Robin. Before we go, is there anything else you would like to share?
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and also to just anybody who is starting out, like, just stick with it and stick with your vision, and just see where it might lead. Like one of my favorite things is follow the curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Awesome advice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Robin, for joining us. We've been chatting with Robin Finney of Wandering Ant today, and we're looking forward to seeing what you do in the next few months and next few years. I can't wait to see you achieve your big, hairy, audacious goal. Thank you.
Thank you.